All right, so we are here today with Professor Kylowna Moton, who actually emailed Christine so that our committee could look at her shell. And I know that both Martha and I'm Greta Enszer, we both wanted to take the course because it's about Los Angeles. So I wanted to ask you, how did it come about? Why did you choose to do a course about Los Angeles that we would all want to take?
So we're talking about my English 101 course. I'm English in the English department. And I know that we have been having, some issues with getting people into 101 and to persist in 101, and that we know that we're getting a variety of levels coming into 101 lately.
And the law passed, yes.
Yes, and also because, I've been working on decolonizing project with NCTE since 2016, really. And all these things kind of come together, and I try to design a course that allowed entry for people who maybe were not very academic in their background and their preparation, but could engage in a class. And I wanted to bring the course material to something that they could relate to. Personally, I wanted my students to leave the class and still see my class as relevant to their own lives. So I thought, well, we're in Los Angeles. I actually am interested in Los Angeles myself, but I didn't want the class to be just about what I'm interested in. I wanted it to be about something that the students could actually engage in and be interested in. So I thought, why don't we learn about Los Angeles? These are things that most people don't know about LA when we're looking at the story of this city. And my students say it every semester, like, I wish I knew this sooner. Why don't I know this? And I thought it's something that they could plug into and have, course material that is of high interest to them. That's one of the hurdles that we face in any class. We've been, you and I worked in LAUSD. We know that this has been a hurdle that we've been trying to overcome for a long time, that we have material that the students are interested in as we try to teach them the academic skills that we want them to take away from the class. And so that's why I picked the Los Angeles. Also because I happened to come across these materials on my own, and I thought, this is super fascinating. And then I started bringing them together, like, I should bring this to my students. Because, as teachers, we always do that. If we love it, if we see it out in the world and it's important or interesting, we think maybe my students would like this, and we try to bring it to the classroom. And so that's how this whole thing kind of came about.
So I just want to share the screen and show, because I didn't know about Lost LA. So that was like a great thing for me to look at, and the documentaries that went around along with it. And then also, can you talk a little bit, we talk about OER, zero cost texts. How did you go about choosing these texts, and how did you find them so that, for example, this one links right to the digital library, and so it's completely free to students. They're able to access it in PDF and everything. Can you talk a little bit about?
Right. So all of this takes place over time. This is a book that I actually found at the Central Library, the LA Public Library downtown. And I used to, all of my books, the David Ulin book, this book, the William Fox book, all of my books, I used to just have the students buy them, but they were getting harder and harder to find enough copies of them, plus some of the books, plus some of the students just never would get the books. Even when I had the books on reserve in the library, they weren't able to go to the library to check it out for 2 hours. It was just always kind of a problem with them getting the books. And I didn't want to have that be an issue in the class. So I actually talked to Katie, the librarian who's no longer there, and she said, let me look these up for you. So she found, like, we have these, you can permalink these books to your class and they can use them. They're accessible, they're good to go. I'm like, great. So I did that. And then as far as the rhetoric book, I used to use a different book that I really loved, and it really got to the heart of what I was teaching in the class, but it was not digital. It was not accessible. It was only one format. And I would ask the publisher every now and then, any chance you're going to, create other formats for this book, or, and they were like, nope, that's it. And so finally, I just said, I talked to Katie again, and she gave me a couple of options for rhetoric guides that were free and online. Because, and I mean, it's important to me that they have something that's free, because we're not studying the book front to back. It's a reference book, and we refer to parts of it to understand what we are doing in the class. And for me to make a student pay $50 for a book that we're going to refer to here and there, I just felt like that was a burden, and I wanted a book that was free. And so I settled on this book. It seemed like it covered some of the ideas, and it covers them in short chunks. The chapters are very short, the sections are very short, and the students can kind of digest that. So I picked this book, and that's how we got it.
And I also love how you put the link to the library orientation so they can see that. You've incorporated so much of additional supplementary free resources on top of your modules. So we loved that. We also loved all these icons that make it really easy for students to color code and go and see, what they have to read that week. It's very simple. It's very well laid out, but the rigor is all there, which made it even, very interesting for us to go in there and look at, because as I said, I had not seen Lost LA, and it was such a delight to go in there and learn. I went into not only what you did in your course, but all the other ones. So I'm sure students do that as well. I also wanted to just talk about.
So let me just say, I used to kind of recommend that students watch Lost LA, but I found that they weren't doing it. So I had to embed it into the course if I really wanted them to see it, to use this resource as they're researching LA over the course of the semester. And so I embedded it in there. And I also included a quiz, which I don't think is like a gotcha quiz. It's really just, let's review this material that you've just learned. Let me ask you some questions about it to make sure that you're thinking about what you just learned. And I really wanted the class, you mentioned that the rigor is there. I didn't want the online class to be some watered down version of my regular class. I wanted to take my regular face-to-face class and make it an online class.
Yes.
So I kept all of those things that I teach in face-to-face, I still do them in the online class. The semester is actually set up to be, to model what it means to be a research, to do research and be a research-based writer. And so over the course of the semester, you're reading, watching, and writing about Los Angeles and texts about Los Angeles, and trying to express different ways of thinking about LA. And then at the end of the semester, there's a project that my idea is that they will pull from all the things they've been learning and writing and put together a project that uses that material as the basis for what they have to say and what they're going to argue, versus just pulling out, the trite, commonplace stereotypes and myths that people say and just saying those things over and over again. The idea is that you've read enough and you've seen enough and you've even written enough in response to the text, to the readings, that you can make statements now that are based on research, whether it's materials in class or the materials from the library. After we have the orientation, that you're gonna work from this, you're gonna build basis of knowledge, some content knowledge, and then you're going to write from that. So that's kind of how the semester is meant to work over the entire term. And so yeah, I definitely didn't want, I wanted to be accessible to students, no matter where they come in and what they've read or learned before, but I also wanted it to be, this is a college class. You've got to do a lot of work when you're in a college class, so you can get into the habit of writing in response to text. You get in the habit of reading things and reading often, and then thinking about what you read and saying something about that, and then like having things built cumulatively as well. So I try to have a lot of levels to everything that I do, and in the course, that everything in the course has multiple purposes, like pedagogical purposes and learning outcome purposes. And maybe students won't get everything out of it that is possible, but it's in there and they can get it. And then I just try to be reasonable about what I expect from students, knowing that they're coming in with various levels of preparation before they get to this class.
And so I loved, as you talk about accessing the text, accessing the material being engaged, I also love some of the strategies that you use to scaffold. And one of those things that I saw that I really loved is that you give the academic language. And then not only do you give the academic language in a page, but then you go ahead and you lecture in the video along with the visual PowerPoint. And then you give this, how exactly to write, for our subject area, a rhetorical précis. I just don't know if you have any other tips that maybe you want to give to professors about online learning, because what we really saw in this course was, as you said, it really took what you were already doing in person in the face-to-face course, and then you transferred all that content, rigor, those strategies for the students to access in a synchronous and an asynchronous course. So I don't know if there's any last things that you want to talk about, but we just we're delighted and really excited to see our professors and what we're doing at City College for, when the ACCJC comes. I think that they would be incredibly impressed by this course.
Well, one thing I would say, I think we already said it, kind of covered it, is that the idea of the online course is to find the way to bring your face-to-face course online. And you don't have to do a different thing. You just find what you need to do to bring what you do in the classroom to the online course. And one thing that I would say is I had to really drill down to what I was actually teaching, right? What did I want students to know? And for me, the intro to college reading and writing was about understanding audience and purpose and genre. And so I didn't want to just drill one type of writing or one type of essay into them, because I'm already finding that they have a sense of what should happen in writing, and they just do that over and over, no matter what the prompt is. And so what I'm trying to get them to see is that you have to change what you do as a writer, depending on what prompt you're responding to. You can't just do the same thing. It won't work, right? And so that was one thing, is I really wanted them to understand audience, purpose, genre. I really wanted them to understand what kind of thinking goes into writing, what kind of things you kind of have to have as strategies before you can approach any piece of writing. You can't just expect to be told what to do every step of the way. Whenever you're going to write something, you should have some things in reserve. So that's why you'll see those handouts for writing, I forgot what it's called now, but it's structure and beginnings, middles, and ends.
Yes.
You see the document for collecting information, because if you don't have information collected, you will have nothing to say. You'll be trying to remember what the professor said and just say that back, which is not what I want in the writing. So I do that, what I call the sequence, which is the rhetorical précis, the descriptive outline, before after reflection, as a means of, this is how you study a text that you're going to analyze and collect information about it, things that you think, things that you've noticed, that you can observe, and then you can take that data and turn it into the piece of writing that you want to do. And you won't have anything to say if you don't do the pre-writing. You just won't. I mean, that's the problem that I see often in student writing. They don't really know what to say about the prompt. And so there was that. And then there was this other idea that, you know, just to be academic doesn't mean reading only obscure, esoteric kind of text and like, you know, things that we did when we were in grad school or upper division. You can have an academic approach to all kinds of texts. And that's what students, in my opinion, need, because the arguments that they are being confronted with on a daily basis in real life are not in these academic texts. They're in the media. They're in people talking to their friends and their family. They're in people that they come in contact with every day. And so the materials that I use are everyday materials. But I feel like being an academic writer is more about the moves you make rather than the form you take. So what do you do when you're doing a piece of writing based on research? Well, you don't write a research paper in real life, whatever that is. You write an article that's informed by research. You write a book chapter that's informed by research. You write maybe a web page, although I don't have my students do that, but you write something that's based on research, but it's not just, here's what I researched, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I try to have them make academic moves, regardless of what the material is or where it comes from. Like when you read those articles about Los Angeles from New York Times, New Yorker, et cetera, you should be making academic moves when you come across these kinds of arguments. Like, what is the evidence here? Is the evidence interpreted in a logical way? Is there author bias? You can apply
all how you start that conversation with New York and LA, where they might not have that schema and that context of what it's like to view from LA if they've never lived from anywhere else.
Yeah.
But again, it brings in that critical thinking piece where you're having them go beyond summary into analysis, into critical thinking, which is what we want for students in a democratic society.
Yes. And so I feel like if we insist on what we consider academic text and academic writing, that it doesn't really touch on their lives yet. Now, if they're going to keep going up into and become an English major, which is what I also hope for, and like keep pursuing this, then those things might come into play. More of these the texts that we are familiar with from our long careers in English. But for them, I think it has to be everyday materials, and that there are arguments there, and that you can use those critical thinking moves, and you should use them on what you encounter in your everyday life, and that your life is worthy of writing. Like some of the materials that they pick to write about, it has to be about them, because I don't really feel like you can make writers become objective and take themselves out of the writing before they've ever been in the writing. It's like you were missing a step here. So one of the assignments is to research and write about places that they spend time in LA because of something that's important to them. Yeah. And they don't, it's not very easy. I thought it would be easier than it is, but it's not super easy to explain why, or to show why the place matters without just telling, and to show what is the place matter to the larger community, like what's the history of the place and how to get there. But they do enjoy it once they get there. But the point is that I want the students to be in the writing. I want them to understand that what they have experienced and what they know about is also a subject for research and for writing. Like, you
Which
don't,
make them the primary source
yes,
of telling what is today,
yes,
what is LA today, because it's always changing and the narratives are different. And you do a great job too, culturally responsive in talking about the indigenous people of Los Angeles
yeah.
and, you know, the history of it, which was also, you know, fascinating. And I think things that our students can engage in,
Yeah.
knowing the history of our city. So, and I also want to just mention that you also do, you know, you hit all our student learning objectives with, you know, MLA format, word count, et cetera. So you are, again, setting up that standard of academic writing and how the format, but yet engaging them in what is meaningful to them and
Right.
what they can access. So
Right.
anyway,
I feel like content and meaning has to come before a format. Like, you use those things to get your message across in a more clear way, but it can't be all about the format when you have nothing to say. You have to have something to say first and a reason to say it, and then you can think about format. And that's the order that I place importance on it, and that's the order that I approach it in. So, yeah.
I just want to say thank you, because it was a delight to see your rhetorical expertise and to see your pedagogical moves and strategies. And again, even if I were not a professor looking at this course, it was just so great to learn more about my city with the resources that you gave and the conversations that you set up for your students to have. So thank you so much for volunteering.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, so more to be revealed.
I just want to say, if anyone looks at this and wants to talk more about the course, I am, you know, you can obviously email me, Moton, ka@lacitycollege.edu.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome.
All right.